Hello, welcome to the 6x6 Fiction Cafe. 6x6 is the regular quarterly showcase for writers in the city of Stoke-on-Trent and beyond, and this is the first of our virtual events. We're opening with Bev Adams. Bev is a writer of poetry and flash fiction. She won the inaugural Potteries Prize for flash fiction, and someday, she tells us, she hopes to write something of longer than 1,000 words. And she's reading her story, Kintsukuroi.
Thanks. The story I'd like to read is Kintsukuroi. Here she comes, wrapped in a long dark coat and a haze of sorrow. She'll press the buzzer, I'll let her in. The light in my studio will stress the shadows beneath her eyes and the halo of silver in her hair that she hasn't coloured in months. As she removes a tightly wrapped bundle from her backpack, I'll see her hands are trembling, and I'll say, "Let me help you." We'll open the package between us, and there'll be dirt and dog hair and a long dead spider swept up with the fragments of a broken bowl. "It's all there," she'll say, anxiously twisting her wedding ring around her finger. She'll tell me the bowl has been in the same place, on the same shelf, in the same corner of the room for years and years, and that it's all her fault because her hands are old and weak and swollen. And I'll say that accidents happen, and I can fix it because that's what I do. I breathe life into broken things. She'll tell me they bought it on honeymoon in France, and the blue matched the colour of the sea in the light of the Côte d'Azur. Then the lines on her brow will deepen, and she'll ask if I can repair it so she won't see the cracks. And I'll smile and tell her to come back on Saturday. Tomorrow, I will spread the remains of the bowl on a clean white cloth, wipe away years of grease and grime and tobacco smoke, until shards of colour are scattered in front of me like shattered fragments of a rainbow. And as I restore leaves to stems, stems to flowers, and petals to blooms, I'll praise the artist's loose, forgiving brushstrokes. And she will dust the shelf in the corner of her room and recall the colours of the French Riviera. On Wednesday, I will peel away the tape and inspect each fault, from hardly there hairlines to veins that run deep, each following its own path. And I will mix new clay, and with it fill gaps between the fissures. And she will take a bottle from her bathroom cabinet and paint over her halo of grey. On Thursday, I will file and file and file again the edges of the imperfections, work them smooth, so when I close my eyes and explore the surface with my lightest touch, I will not find its faults. And she will place flowers on her husband's grave and ask if he remembers the shop on the quay in Villefranche-sur-Mer where he bought her a bowl that they filled with fruit from the market and ate as they lazed on the balcony of the villa overlooking the sea. On Friday, I will take my finest brush and trace each line with scarlet lacquer. And before it dries, dust gold powder over each vein before brushing away the residue and polishing each imperfection until it gleams. And she will wear a bright patterned dress and shoes with heels. She'll paint her lips and walk into town and smile at a stranger as the breeze caresses colour into her cheeks. On Saturday, she'll press the buzzer and I'll let her in. The light in my studio will catch the path of gold as the bowl revolves on a wheel. As it turns, she'll trace the lines with her finger, round and round again, each journey different from the one before. Its beauty will hijack her breath, and when she says she's afraid to hold it, I'll tell her the bowl is stronger for its imperfections, more resilient, bound by its scars. And she'll take it home and place it on a different shelf in a different room where gold will capture sunlight. Thanks.
Our next writer is Sue Eaton. Sue's short fiction has appeared in various anthologies across many genres, and she has even been featured on BBC Radio 4. Her story is titled Harry's Mid-Morning Adventure.
Harry was not sure how it happened. At first he was glad there was no one else about to see, but later, especially after his wife had laid it on with the trowel, he wasn't so sure. Things could have taken a nasty turn. It had been a cool day for July, but not so cold that he was not able to sit comfortably by the side of the lake and contemplate the state of life, the universe, and anything else that slipped quietly and unbidden into his mind as he waited for the fish to bite. The weather had remained dry, and for that he was grateful. There was nothing worse than a good soaking. Not that he wasn't prepared, with waterproofs, umbrella and a flask of hot coffee. It was just that sometimes the rain was so pervasive it seemed to get in everywhere. He had been the only angler there that morning, but even so, the fish were slow to bite. By the time he caught a second reasonably sized trout, he decided to call it a day and head for home. He had 2 nice fish, one each for him and his wife. They would make a good meal, and so would have to do. He started to pack up his tackle, carefully reversing the process he had followed when he first arrived, and placing individual pieces into his tackle bag. Soon there was only the collapsible chair to fold and tuck under his arm, and then he would be ready for the off. He stretched and turned round to check that he'd left nothing behind before fastening his bag when it happened. Something seemed to grab at his ankle. He looked down fleetingly and saw that he'd placed his left foot within the strap of the tackle bag. He stepped carefully back, lifting the foot high, but the strap had somehow wrapped itself around his ankle, and the act of raising the foot caused him to become unbalanced. He put out his right arm to rectify this, but he tilted too far. He put out his left to redress the balance, but all he succeeded in doing was looking like the dingle-dangle scarecrow his granddaughter loved to sing about. He looked wildly around for something to grab. There was nothing there. He wobbled precariously for a few seconds before he felt himself overbalanced to the point of no return. Bugger, he thought, at the exact same moment as he realised there was nothing he could do but continue to fall. Fortunately, or unfortunately, it depended on how he looked at it, he fell into the lake. This was fortunate because it was a soft landing, no bones broken. It was unfortunate because although the air wasn't particularly cold, the water was, and he was in it up to his neck. His first thought was that he would be in it up to his neck when he got home as well. He doubted he would be allowed in the house in this state. Also, with the strap caught snugly around his ankle, the bag went in with him, and as he had yet to fasten it, all his belongings tumbled out and into the lake willy-nilly. His second thought was bugger. Harry felt among the weeds and the silt for his precious pieces of fishing tackle. He was cold now, and his fingers didn't seem to want to work. Eventually he collected everything from the bottom of the lake, counting them as he placed them in the bag, and then securely fastening it so he didn't lose them again. He would have to check them properly when he got home, but if he had lost anything, it wasn't something he readily spotted. It was a good job he had left his phone in the car. His was not the mobile phone era, more the put 4 pennies in the slot and press button A period. English weather being intermittently atrocious, Harry always kept a plastic sheet in the car for when he went fishing. He squelched to where the car was parked and spread the sheet over the driver's seat before sinking in, activating the ignition and turning up the heat. Perhaps he could divert the good wife's attention with the 2 fat trout he had caught for dinner. In the meantime, he would have to let her know what to expect. He sighed as his hand hovered over his phone.
The third in our collection of writers is Misha Herwin. Misha writes books for children and adults, as well as short stories and plays, and she is reading an extract from her current book, which is Island of Fear, the third book in the series of The Adventures of Letty Parker.
Ship to starboard, the lookout called from the crow's nest. Where? Letty shielded her eyes against the glare. There, Mango pointed. Can't see no flag as yet. Looks like she's coming straight at us, Letty said. Jeb frowned and shrugged. Maybe she's wanting news from home, he suggested. They stood and watched as the frigate carved a relentless path towards the Ellen Rose. She's all right, Jeb put a hand on Letty's shoulder. See, she's flying the Union Jack. Janers, Letty cried, her voice drowned out by the shout from the lookout as the Jack was lowered and a red flag hoisted. Pirate ship on starboard bow, the lookout shouted. It's the Xanthi, Malachi's storm ship. Get to your posts, lads, the boatswain yelled. Sailors swarmed over the deck, eager to obey. Jeb grabbed Letty's arm. Get below. Go on. The governor's daughter has got to be hiding in her cabin. Rats to her, Letty snapped her fingers. That's the first place they'll look. And I'm not sitting there waiting for some pirate to come and get me. If I'm going to hide, then it'll be somewhere they won't think of. And Mango's coming with me. Sorted? Sorted, Jeb repeated. With any luck, it won't come to that. Of course it won't, Letty said, crossing her fingers. Hoist the mainsail, the boatswain shouted. Captain says we'll outrun her. It's going to be all right, Mango said. And if it's not, they don't carry no guns on the Ellen Rose. If we don't escape, there's going to be a fight. And judging by the size of the Xanthi, I don't reckon we'd win. Letty remembered the cries of pain, the blood and the smells when the Bear's men fought the Count and the Dark Ones. She thought of the boys that had slipped to their death over the side of the gorge, and the terror she had felt when she was clinging to a branch suspended high above the river. She'd survived, and so had Jeb and Mango. But judging by the grim faces of the crew, this time she and her friends might not be so lucky. The Ellen Rose caught the wind. The ship started to gather speed. Letty's hair blew wildly. The sea spray stung her skin. But glancing over her shoulder, she saw the Xanthi was still gaining on them. The captain gave his orders. The boatswain yelled at the crew as he charged up and down the deck, making sure that every man was doing what he should. The crew sweated and toiled. The masts creaked and groaned under the weight of canvas. The sails billowed, but the pirate ship was catching up, her red flag with its streak of black lightning clearly visible as she drew closer. Get down, Jeb yelled. Mango obeyed instantly, but Letty didn't move. The gun ports on the pirate ship opened, and the muzzles of the cannons, like the heads of a posse of monsters, appeared. There was a dull sound of firing, and a wisp of white smoke. A hand grabbed Letty's ankle, and Mango pulled her down beside him. Letty, get into the boat, he hissed. What boat? The one over there, Mango pointed. Come on. Without waiting for a reply, he set off at a run towards a small boat covered with a tarpaulin. Lifting the cover, he slid inside, and Letty climbed in after him. There was another burst of gunfire. We're not going to get away, Letty said. But all they'll want is the cargo, so if we can keep quiet and still. Mango nodded and moved closer, his shoulder touching hers. Muffled voices drifted into their cramped hiding place. "We should surrender, Captain," the boatswain said urgently, "or we'll all be killed." "Never. If we fight, we don't stand a chance," a sailor groaned. "They'll slit our throats," another man added. Letty pressed her lips together. Not mine, she thought, nor Mango's. There's got to be a way out of here. There must. "Furl the mainsails. Hoist the white flag. Let's see if this sea-wolf is ready to bargain," the captain ordered. Mango shuddered. "I won't let them get you," Letty said. "If they do, they'll sell me. It's not going to happen." She put her hand over his. "Promise. I'll think of something. I will." "It's all rats and pants," she muttered. "We didn't ought to be here. This didn't ought to be happening." Mango squeezed her fingers. "Pirate ship alongside, Captain," the boatswain said. There was the sound of an iron hook latching onto the rail. Letty knelt up and raised a corner of the tarpaulin. "Don't!" Mango pulled at her skirt. "They'll see us. I have to know what's going on." Letty kept as low as she could. Feet thumped and landed on the deck. There were shouts and yells, followed by the clatter of swords and pistols as the crew dropped their weapons. "I am Malachi Storm, captain of the Xanthi, and I claim the Ellen Rose and any cargo she is carrying." The pirate captain's voice rang through the clamour. Thank you. And this is from Island of Fear, my new Letty Parker adventure, out at the moment. Our next reader is Debbi Voisey. She writes flash fiction and short stories and runs writing workshops. More about those on www.debbivoisey.com. Debbie's reading A Scary Stop.
This story was written in a workshop which asked us to reference a significant news event in our lives and also to bring into it a family with troubles. So this is called A Scary Stop, and it's set in the summer of 1976. In the summer of 76, my cousin fried an egg on a car bonnet and had it for his tea. We watched with open mouths as he scraped it off with a plastic spatula and strutted into the house to get salt. The air was suffocating. I walked barefoot outside and burned blisters into the soles of my feet that didn't heal for a month. At night time, I watched the lightning streak across the tops of the roofs and felt the rumble of the thunder in my ears and in my chest. When the thunder rain came, people rushed out of their houses and stood in it like they'd never seen rain. It was a few weeks before I thought to wonder when Mum would call, like she promised. She never broke promises. Aunt Phyllis said Mum had her own storm going on. My cousin Bridget and I played housewives. Our husbands were members of the Bay City Rollers. Mine was Eric and hers was Woody. Neither of us liked Les, the lead singer, but he often came to our pretend houses to visit as pretend bandmates for pretend tea and biscuits. Sometimes the tea and biscuits were real, but our marriages weren't, and I often wondered if the best marriages were real or pretend, and how on earth you'd know the difference. "How long are you staying?" Bridget asked me, and I didn't know, so I told her 3 months, and her smile widened, because in her crazy house with 13 kids, I think she liked that I was quiet. I had to be quiet in my house to get through the day, silently tiptoeing around my parents and the noise that often came from their bedroom. It sounded like crying, like whimpering, like that thing puppies do when they're scratching at the door to be let out, or are sitting by the side of your chair at the dining table begging for scraps. I always put my hands over my ears, la la la, willing it away. When it did stop, it was a scary stop, and from my room I'd put my head to the wall to listen. My ears would penetrate through my daisy wallpaper, through brick and dust, through teal with gold-flecked paper, across hostile air to the mouth of my father. "I won't tell you again," I often heard that stern mouth say, and I'd imagine the neatly combed hairs of his moustache quivering with the seething control of his words, that tone at which both me and Mum learned to flinch. On another sultry day, the Bay City Rollers were having a press conference in Bridget's bedroom. We had the windows open and a million tiny flies had swarmed in. I was flicking some off my arm when Phyllis shouted upstairs that Dad was on the phone. Not Mum. Strange, she never broke her promises and Dad never phoned. A scary stop. I walked downstairs, flinching even before I heard his voice. Thank you.
And now we have Barry Lillie. Barry writes articles for magazines, short stories, and his novel, Motorway Horses, will be out on Kindle at the end of the month. His story is The Javelin.
Hi, this is called The Javelin Thrower, and it's Dennis's story from a new collection of works called 25 Voices. I was nervous. Not sure why. It wasn't as if I was about to perform open heart surgery for the first time or scale the council offices wearing just a pair of Wellington boots and a cagoule. It was just a job interview. The first I'd been offered in 23 months, 2 weeks and 4 days. I had to fill in my application online and then they asked me to bring along a copy. 20 pence a sheet at the phone shop next to the Chinese takeaway on Lambton Lane. On reception was a youth with one of those ponytails on top of his head, pulled so tight that he looked like a startled cockatoo. He directed us all to a meeting room. We looked at each other, faces questioning, waiting for another of our pack of applicants to move first. A man wearing a cerise tie that perfectly matched the colour of his nose stepped forward, and that was the impetus that got us moving. I'd never seen so many shirt and tie combinations on so many uncomfortable looking men before. Crumpled suits from the rear of a wardrobe had been dug out for the duration, and later they'd be back in the dark resting on a non-recyclable plastic hanger. Once inside the meeting room, we all shuffled into available chairs and pretended to be occupied with our folders. No one appeared interested in speaking to anyone else. I wasn't in the mood for small talk. So I pulled at a thread that was hanging from the seam of my best wedding cum funeral cum christening slacks. I looked up, and framed in the doorway was a woman with shoulders so broad she'd have made a great javelin thrower. She was dressed in a jacket the colour of grass and consulted a clipboard, more I think to give her an air of authority rather than to double-check the details upon it. My name was called and I rose, wiped the fronts of my shoes on the back legs of my trousers and followed her out of the room. "Nice tie, Dennis," she said, indicating for me to hand her the folder and sit down. "Christmas present for my wife in..." She was obviously not interested, so I didn't bother completing my sentence. "So, Dennis, what qualities do you think you can bring to the position on offer?" Lunch was a tuna sandwich and a can of something fizzy. And after, with a gut full of gas and fishy breath, I was back in the interview room with 7 other hopefuls. We sat in a circle, and our interviewer is standing in the centre. The green jacket had been removed, revealing impressive biceps beneath a sheer blouse. Must be all that javelin throwing, I thought, allowing myself a wry smile. She informed us that we'd been selected to participate in a recruitment workshop. Firstly, we're asked to think up 3 statements to deliver to the rest of the group. 2 true and 1 false. And considering that none of us knew each other, it seems to me to be a pointless task. An applicant is chosen, and a dumpy little man with several chins stood up. His neck wobbled as he told us his 3 statements. The first being, he'd built a radio-controlled scale model of the Bismarck. The second, that he'd once won a pie eating contest in Holmfirth whilst on a last of the summer wine day trip. And finally, that he'd walked the length of Adrian's Wall to highlight the declining population of the great crested newt. "Thank you," said the interviewer. "So which of the statements do we think is false?" "The third," said a man wearing a floral tie with a large knot that looked like a hanging basket under his chin. "He looks like he'd struggle to walk the length of a swimming pool." Dumpy shot him an angry glance and pointed out that the false statement was actually the pie-eating contest. OK, let's settle down now. Dennis, can you approach the group, please? I looked at the complacent faces in the circle, took a breath and I said, I left school in the year of Her Majesty's Silver Jubilee, and so my 3 statements are from 1977. Oh, and by the way, they're all true. 1. The Yorkshire Ripper attacked 6 women, 4 of whom died. 2. Manchester United Football Club sacked Tommy Docherty. And 3. Chrysler built the Sunbeam, a car that looked like a Lego brick on wheels. The complacent faces now looked confused. I know what I've just said was pointless because, you see, when I arrived here this morning I was nervous. Sounds ridiculous now, I'm nearly 59 years of age and I'm asked to participate in this stupidity for a part-time job stacking supermarket shelves. Back in 1977 I was asked 2 questions. Can you do the job and when can you start? Times change. It's called progress, our interviewer said. It's called nonsense, I said. I don't want a job so badly that I'm prepared to make a fool of myself. This workshop shenanigans, it may tick boxes, but let me tell you this. I indicated towards the 7 other men sat in the room. You might as well stand us all in a line and throw a javelin, and whoever it spears gets the job. And so I walked away thinking, that were 80 pence wasted on printing.
And finally, Jan Edwards. Jan was the winner of the Arnold Bennett Prize with the first of her Blanche Courtney books. Today, she is reading from the 3rd in the series, Listed Dead.
The 2 land girls were clattering across the yard as Bunch Courtney emerged from the dairy. Their voices were gin clear on a frosted air. According to that Rowley Jenner, he's been out there after night, Gwynnie said. I heard the driver copped it, Val replied. Oh, just think. Gwenny's voice dropped to a breathless stage whisper. Some poor chap laying out there in the cold and dark and dying just like that. Morning, girls, Bunch called. Something going on I should know about? Morning, boss, said Gwenny. There's a car in a ditch up Lich Hill, so Mr. Jenner says. Really? Anyone from around here? Not a clue, boss. Car's a red one, though. Red? Is it indeed? Bunch rubbed at her lower lip. The half of Lich Hill was on the estate, and she should go and check it out, though there was a mountain of paperwork awaiting her attention. On the other hand, Perringham's estate's retired steward lived close to there, and Parson drives a red Austin Ruby, she thought. I'll never forgive myself if something's happened to him and I did nothing. Well, thanks for telling me, girls. I'll make inquiries. Bunch crossed quickly to where a black fell pony Perry was tethered and headed out across the downs. The skies were just losing the pinks of dawn in favour of a wintry blue, and the crisp November frost had turned the ground to iron. But the air was sweet, and the hillsides quiet, not a whisper of the fighter craft from Tangmere and Parham that had been fending off the Luftwaffe on a seemingly daily basis, and she revelled in the peace of the day. 15 minutes later, she was reining Perry in beside the copse, from where she could view the crash scene at a discreet distance. She could see the ambulance, sharing a stretch of icy verge with the police Wolsey. Dr. Lewis's old E-type Vauxhall was pulled into the entrance of Chell's Farm, just where the road dived between the trees toward Inship Village, and midway between them all, the rear end of a wrecked sports car, protruding from the ditch at a giddy angle, its spare wheel pointing eye-like at the sky, while its red bonnet was buried deep in glutinous Sussex mud. Bunch knew a Jaguar Roadster when she saw one, and that, she told herself, is about as far from being Parsons Austin Ruby as it's possible to get. A small group was gathered around the rear of the ambulance, and she recognised P.C. Botting and the ageing Dr. Lewis as both were Winkham residents, and not unexpected. But Detective Inspector William Wright, she mused, now he's a curiosity. All this way for a motor accident. Something's brewing. Wright was hunched against a chill, making him seem even leaner than she remembered. The brim of his trademark fedora was pulled down against the cold air, and she just knew those town shoes of his would be wholly inadequate against the crackles of icy mud around his feet. She urged Perry down to the road and halted just a few yards from the group. Wright shot a covert glance in her direction and then back to the stretchered body. "Damn you," Bunch muttered. "Are we really going to go through all this territorial nonsense again?" She slid from the saddle and hitched Perry to the field gate. "Good morning, Wright," she called. "Long time no see. And who's this?" She jerked her head toward the body, outlined beneath a meagre blanket, and paused. The body's feet were uncovered, and she wanted to tug the cloth over them because it somehow seemed to matter. Wright's voice dragged her back from the notion. "Miss Courtney, how may we help you?" "Oh, I heard there was an accident on the estate, and naturally I had to check." "How very conscientious," he said. "Oh, noblesse oblige and all that." "I'm sure. I assume you know Dr. Lewis?" "I do indeed. Good morning, Lewis." The GP doffed his hat and added a slight bow. "Tragic event, Miss Courtney. Awful way for a young man to go." "Do we know who it is?" Bunch craned her neck for a closer look and rolled her eyes as Lewis attempted to block her view of the dead man. She smiled at Wright. "Bit beneath you, isn't it? A motor shunt is more PC Botting's bailiwick." "No police work is beneath me," he growled. "I am a serving officer." Bunch knew she'd hit a raw spot. Nothing was going to deflect her now. "Course you are," she said. "I'm just surprised you traipse up here from Brighton because some bear cubs come a perler on the ice. So come on, out with it. What's special about this chap?" "Nothing so far," Wright snapped. "PC Botting put a call out for reinforcement, and here I am." Wright rubbed at the back of his neck. "Oh, you'll have to excuse me. Been on duty all night, and then I'm called out to this." "Anything I can do?" Bunch asked. "Well, since you're a bit horsey." Wright lifted his chin to eye her up and down. "Our victim does have a hunt type in. You might even know him." Bunch met his stare head on. The horsey jibe stung. "See here, Inspector." Lewis laid a protective hand on the stretcher. "Asking a lady to identify corpses by the roadside. Simply not done." "Nonsense." Bunch waved the doctor aside. "I'm not some shrinking violet, you should know that." "But it's not a fit place for a young lady," the doctor replied. "Leave the police to do their work." "Oh, I shall," said Bunch. "Once I've assisted the chief inspector here, as he asked so nicely."
Thank you to all our readers. Our next 6x6 will be December. Details online.